And viewers, the top focus story on America 360. U.S. President Donald Trump announcing that his administration will permanently pause migration from all third world countries. Now, this is following an ambush-style shooting near the White House that killed National Guard member Sarah Beckstrom and critically wounded another soldier. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has pointed to the 19 nations already under a Trump-era travel ban when asked about which countries the new pause would cover. The suspected gunman, who was a 29-year-old Afghan national Rahmanullah Lankanwal, is a former member of the CIA-backed Zero Units. He has been granted asylum in April 2025 under the Trump administration. Officials have said that he drove from Washington state to the Capitol before opening fire with a .357 revolver. He faces assault with intent to kill charges, which will be upgraded to first-degree murder if the second soldier dies. Trump used the attack to defend his deployment of National Guard troops to major cities and ordered a review of green cards issued to nationals from the 19 concerned countries. Afghan evacuation resettlement groups stressed that Afghan evacuees underwent extensive vetting and urged against broad stigmatization. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered 500 additional troops to Washington, raising the total to 2,500. And David K. Johnston, who's an American author, now joins us live from New York. Thank you, David, for joining us here at NewsX World. Now, of course, the crackdown that Trump is imposing on these residents and citizens of the countries of concern is being met with severe criticism. How do you think the Trump administration is going to respond? Is there going to be further crackdown, or is it going to concede to some degree?
I think you're going to see more troops on the streets in the United States, which violates an American law called the Posse Comitatus Act. American soldiers, except in the most extraordinary circumstances, namely an invasion of the country, are not supposed to be deployed against American citizens. But Trump has long talked of doing this, and he's done it in several major cities, and I expect you will see more of this. By the way, most of the troops in Washington, D.C. have nothing to do because crime is so low in the nation's capital, has been falling for years, except when it rose during the first Trump administration. So we see these National Guard soldiers, these are part-time soldiers, doing things like picking up litter and spreading mulch in parks.
All right, and how should you respond to the accusations that are coming from these, in fact, also the United Nations, not just the countries of concern, the 19 countries that have been listed?
Well, Trump is very anti-immigrant, which is a little bizarre because his mother was an immigrant and 2 of his 3 wives were immigrants.
Interesting.
But Trump has been looking for a way at the direction of his Deputy White House Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, who at the DC Report News Service we call Trump's Minister of Hate, to remove people. And Trump's comments suggest that he intends to go after naturalized American citizens and take away their citizenship. The administration has also argued that it has a right to remove American citizens it doesn't like from the United States. And this is a very troublesome and unconstitutional conduct. But it will matter how the court, particularly the U.S. Supreme Court, weighs in on this. I think any trial court will stand in the way of Trump's efforts, but the U.S. Supreme Court has repeatedly found ways to allow Trump to take these extra constitutional and extra legal actions.
All right, do stay on with us, David. Let's also tell our viewers what the United Nations has to say on this. Now, the UN has pushed back against Trump's latest remarks on migration, and it has stressed that people seeking refugees camps and asylums are entitled to protection under international law. The UN Refugee Agency has said that overwhelming majority of refugees are law-abiding members of their host communities and emphasized that all asylum seekers must be given due process and access to territory regardless of political circumstances. The UN Human Rights Office echoed that view, reminding governments that individuals fleeing conflict or persecution have a legal right to seek safety and should not be collectively penalized. Let's bring back David into the conversation here. David, do you think the UN's remark is going to have any effect on Trump? In fact, I also want to ask you whether this move of Trump is going to, better his credit ratings.
Well, the UN is exactly right about the law, both international law and American law. But Trump is not constrained by law. I mean, understand that he is the third generation head of a 4-generation white-collar crime family. We have a number of white-collar crime families. One of the things I teach my criminal justice students at Rochester Institute of Technology is about white-collar crime families in America. They don't kill people or break their legs. They steal with contracts and getting government officials to take their side in disputes. Domestically, his efforts to remove people have proven incredibly unpopular, and we will get a test of that next week. There is a special election to replace a member of Congress in Tennessee in a district that Trump won by 22 percentage points. And the Republican running in that race may lose, but anything less than the 22 points Trump got would be a signal of the increasing revulsion of many Americans to Trump's efforts to remove people from the country, many of whom are law-abiding, have permission to be here, and in more than 100 cases were U.S. citizens whom the government absolutely has no right to remove from the country.
Well, absolutely. To stay on with us, David, viewers, let's also tell you that Trump has also said that the U.S. will very soon begin actions to stop suspected Venezuelan drug traffickers operating on land. Now, Trump stated that while drug traffickers have shifted to sea routes, the U.S. military will now target drug operations on land, which he called easier to interdict. Now, the U.S. has already carried out multiple strikes against alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and Pacific. The U.S. government has accused Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro of involvement in the drug trade, although Maduro denies these allegations. And let's bring back David into the discussion here. David, what is the collateral damage here when U.S. deploys its boats in the Caribbean? There's allegations of loss of lives and prevention of drug smuggling and trafficking into the U.S. But how can this collateral damage in terms of the loss of human life be prevented?
Well, Kriti, the first thing to know is that the Trump administration's own drug enforcement agency says that there are no smuggling of fentanyl into the United States from Venezuela. None, zero. And yet Trump keeps alleging that that's happening. And only a tiny portion of other illegal drugs entering the U.S. come from Venezuela. In fact, according to Trump's administration, less than 1% of the drugs smuggled into the U.S. come via Venezuela. So this is a made-up excuse to go after a government that Trump doesn't like and the people around him don't like. What this runs the risk of is several things. First of all, we've repeatedly blocked a Russian ship carrying naphtha. Venezuela has the most oil in the world in the ground, but it is so thick you have to thin it with naphtha in order to refine it. And the U.S. military has interdicted this Russian ship repeatedly. Yeah. It is risking being separated from the rest of the world and becoming basically a pariah state if we continue down this path.
All right. Well, I thank you, David, for joining us here at NewsX World and sharing your opinion with us. And viewers, let's now shift our focus. Now, dozens of Panamanians have gathered outside the foreign ministry in the Panama City to protest what organizers described as growing U.S. military involvement in the country. The demonstration, organized by the Broad Front for Democracy, included the delivery of a letter calling on the government to reject any U.S. intervention and to disclose the number of U.S. troops and types of weapons currently in Panama. Protesters carried banners and waved national flags, citing concerns over U.S. military pressure on Venezuela. The group also urged authorities to oppose potential U.S. military bases and to withdraw from security cooperation agreements they consider a threat to national sovereignty. Let's listen in.
Al Ministerio de Relaciones Exteriores y al gobierno como tal, que dé un informe detallado a la nación qué cantidad de tropas norteamericanas están acantonadas en la República de Panamá, qué cantidad de armamento y qué armamento están utilizados, porque la gente ha sido testigo, han habido videos y fotografías de tanquetas, han ubicado tanquetas, aviación y otro tipo de artillerías, de infantería que están dentro de nuestro territorio y nosotros comprendemos. Definitivamente nosotros somos un pueblo de paz, que totalmente prueba un gobierno dócil, un gobierno sumiso, un gobierno vendepatria y una política imperialista que no se detiene y que solamente sueña con el dominio del mundo a pesar de la sangre que tenga que derramar.
Raymond Vickery, who's an international affairs expert, now joins us into this discussion. Thank you, Mr. Vickery, for joining us here at NewsX World. Do you think the demonstration is going to have any effect on Trump's policies?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I don't think they'll have any effect on Trump. Trump has a throwback view of empire. His view is that great nations are entitled to have empires in their sphere of influence. And that's his Latin American policy. This is a throwback to really the 19th century, which we got away from in the 20th century, namely in Panama, by returning the canal to the sovereignty of Panama. And you will recall that early on in Trump's administration, he indicated he might take Panama back by force. He talked about taking Greenland. He talked about Canada being the 51st state. So I think he's impervious to this kind of demonstration. But I do think it's very, very important for the United States going forward, because it demonstrates that people are not going to go back to the 19th century. They're not going to go back to spheres of influence, and that they're going to demand that the fundamentals of the United Nations Charter, namely non-interference with the sovereignty of other nations, be respected. So it's significant, but having an impact on President Trump is not likely. He has a transactional view. He was looking for a transaction in which he can come out and say that he's the winner. This is completely contrary to what you need to be able to do to wage peace and prosperity, which is namely have a strategy and have partners. So it's a distressing development, but one that should have been foreseen. And I predict that if Trump keeps it up, in terms of destroying fishing boats and threatening invasion, that you'll see more of this kind of demonstration.
And is this demonstration going to move the government of Panama? There's strikes and demonstrations being held throughout the year against the government itself and its handling of several issues concerning its citizens.
I think it will have more an impact domestically in terms of Panama. Panama has already pushed back against the idea of turning the canal back over to the United States. They're trying to walk a very fine line here, but they have to listen to what is happening domestically. And as I said, I think that this is going to be a forerunner of what you're going to see if Trump continues this policy of reversion to empire in the Western Hemisphere.
All right, do stay on with us, Mr. Vickery, as I will seek your opinion on another story going forward. For now, viewers, let's also tell you that